everybody for joining us for this Focus on Research event about academia and caring work. Can you just let me know if you can see my screen there? Is that sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep. Great, thank you. So I'm Dr. Tasha Weir. I run the Sage Athena Swan program here at La Trobe, which is a program to improve gender equality and diversity across all disciplines through measurable and sustainable actions. Being part of the SAGE program means that the university understands the barriers to the full participation of women and gender diverse staff, and that we have an action plan to address these barriers, which we do. So one of the main barriers that we identified was caring responsibilities. And I've got a fabulous panel to discuss this, who I will introduce shortly. First, a few bits of housekeeping and an overview of today's event, and into a great panel discussion. And later in the event, I'll be seeking your input on a forthcoming support group for staff with caring responsibilities. So that's something to look forward to. You can post a question at any time using the Q&A button that you can see at the bottom of your screen. And we'll endeavour to get to all of the questions. And if not, we can always follow them up through the Athena Swan at La Trobe inbox. And just a reminder that the session's being recorded. Go to the next slide. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that this virtual event takes place on the lands of many traditional owners. I'm in Kingsbury, which is located on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I acknowledge the living culture of the Wurundjeri people and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and to any First Nations people who are joining us today. I wish to express gratitude for the sharing of this land. I remember that this land is, or was and always will be Aboriginal land. So today's event, we're talking about caring work and how we at La Trobe can create a more carer-friendly research culture. And universities are kind of perceived as carer-friendly or family-friendly. We have really generous parental leave provisions, in fact, some of the most generous of any workplace, and many of us have access to flexible work. However, caring work continues to pose particular, and this is for a number of reasons. And I just wanted to talk about a few of those reasons before we move on. So we know that building up academic capital is crucial, but people finish their PhDs in their mid to late 30s, which for women coincides with peak fertility period. And early career researchers have to build up their academic capital at the very time they may be looking to start a family. And if people do choose to start a family, they often have a career break through parental leave, and many parents return to work on a part-time basis. And being part-time means that everything, of course, happens more slowly. Getting those publications, getting those networks so you can get external grants, even just getting a continuing position. And it's really hard to show you're competitive when you're up against people who've been full-time for their whole research career. So despite relative to opportunity measures, we're all up against the notion of the ideal academic who. And then there's the fact that caring work doesn't end. Often we say caring work and we think of babies, but babies grow up and children need a lot of care. And there's other really important types of caring work too, caring for the elderly, caring for other family members, caring for ourselves, caring for communities. So here at La Trobe, we've got a number of actions in place to make things a bit easier for people with caring responsibilities. And one of those actions is the Tracy Benavenua Fellowship. I'm just going to change my slide. Which was developed in 2018 to support academic staff who've had career interruptions due to intense periods of caregiving duties. The fellowship is named in honour of Tracy Benavenua, a much esteemed member of the history department who sadly passed away in 2017. So far, we've had 8 fellows appointed, 4 in each fellowship again this year, so look out for that in the next 2 weeks. Now, I've got a really lovely video of some of the fellows that I want to share with you today because it really provides an overview of what we will be discussing. So we'll watch the video and then I'll introduce the panel, and thank you panel for hanging in with me during this long introduction. So I'm going to stop sharing and Nicola's going to put the video on.
Tracy Benavenua was an associate professor in history here at La Trobe University. She passed away in 2017, and so this fellowship is in her honour. She was very much, as well as being a committed historian, she was very committed to her children and to balancing those two parts of her life With the Tracy Fellowship, I'm undertaking an oral history of women's experiences of infertility in the period since the 1950s through to the early 21st century. And what's really special about the Tracy Fellowships is that they recognise potential rather than just achievements. So for so many women who have had multiple interruptions to their career, that potential has never really been actualised, has never been turned into the papers and the books and so on because of those interruptions. So this fellowship is really significant.
So my broad field of research is writing the body. I identify as transmasc non-binary, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I actually don't feel like a man. So some people look at me and if they know I'm trans, they think I identify as a trans man, but I'm much more likely to say I'm a trans person. So I've found that my research time has been interrupted both by my caregiving responsibilities, but also because I live with a significant mental illness and a chronic pain condition. So I see myself as someone with basically an invisible disability, and one of the things that reasons I've experienced so many interruptions is because I've needed to take a break to do my own self-care. Transmasc and people and trans men have the lowest salaries of anyone out of any Australian gender-based population group. We're more likely to have chronic health issues. We're more likely to need to have surgeries, to have time to transition. There's all these kinds of things that happen that are also big interrupters in academic careers. There's the reason you don't see many trans people in continuing positions in university. So this fellowship has allowed me to have the time and space to be able to apply for an academic promotion and get that. So I'm now a senior lecturer, which is pretty cool and exciting.
A good proportion of my research involves field work. So I spend a lot of time away from home, in the bush, quite isolated places sometimes. And so with two small children has meant that I haven't been able to undertake the amount of field work that I'd like to do and need to do. When my children were very little, I breastfed them for the first 12 months. So that meant that I couldn't go away without them. That when I went on field work during those periods of time, my partner would take time off from work unpaid and come with me so that the children were there and could be breastfed. I just am so grateful to La Trobe to have this opportunity to be able to spend 3 years focusing on my research. After spending so much time juggling research and my children, it's really nice to have that time to be able to focus on what I want to do.
So here today to continue that conversation about care and responsibilities is a fabulous panel. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michelle McMahon. Welcome, Michelle. Dr. Michelle McMahon is a Yorta Yorta woman whose research examines relational worldviews and principles of First Nations child rearing. Michelle is a multi-award winning researcher. In fact, in 2019, she won a Premier's Research Award, which is amazing. Michelle now works as a social work lecturer and researcher at Shepparton campus, as well as doing Healy, who you saw on the video there. Shannon is a Tracy Fellow and a historian who, as you saw, is currently researching oral and archival histories of Australian women's experiences of infertility, a very important project indeed and the first of its kind in Australia. Welcome Dr. Gillian Garvey, who you also saw on the video. Gillian is an archaeologist and a Tracy Fellow. As you saw, Gillian researches human occupation and use of the landscape in the Southeast Australia in the Quaternary period. I hope I've said that right. She works very closely with Indigenous communities and spends a lot of her time, as we saw, in the field. And finally, welcome Dr. Karen Pike. Dr. Pike is also a Tracy Fellow and a clinical neuropsychologist. Dr. Pike's current research is focused around interventions to improve cognition, and she's doing some amazing work with those living with dementia and more recently with cancer survivors. So I'm going to pick up on some of those themes in the videos, and Shannon, I'm going to start with you if that's okay. Yes, I'll take that as a yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I've got so many screens going.
Yeah, thanks Tasha for that introduction. And I'd also just like to acknowledge that I'm joining from the land of the Boonwurrung peoples on the Mornington Peninsula, and that this land has never been ceded. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present.
Wonderful.
And so the question that I'm going to be discussing to start with I mean, we talked about this, Tasha, was the advice that we would perhaps have for early career people of any gender who are planning to have children or who have children. And then also what advice we would give to the university about how better to support those people with caring responsibilities. And I'd like to address these questions together, because I think that that is, separating them out is sort of fails to address the kind of the crux of the problem. I do have suggestions drawing on my own experience for early career academics who plan to have children or who have children, but I'm keen not to sort of just continue putting the onus on those people to just work smarter. I think the really important changes can come about through moving our focus to the way that university structures themselves need to change to better support early and mid-career academics with caring responsibilities, who are those who are most likely also to be in insecure work. And I think also how senior and ongoing academics themselves can support colleagues who are in casual and vulnerable employment. So this year I became part of a working group on research into women's reproductive experiences and also into academic mothering. And I'm going to be drawing on some of the research that one of the members of that working group, Carla Pascoe-Lay, has done, as well as some other women and some other research. And I can put the details of that research in the chat later if people would like it. And so just before sort of starting with some of that advice, I would like to draw some attention to some of the research that's being done in this area around academic mothering in particular. A 2019 study by researchers from Western Sydney University found that academic mothers' struggles to combine paid work with care work often came at the expense of their self-care, that academic mothers reported prejudice, hostility, and often discrimination, which caused them to make their maternal subjectivity invisible. And this is a quote that the overwhelming majority of women described implicit as well as overt practices of prejudice and hostility towards mothering, and that these women reported experiencing these practices only once they became mothers. So I think that's really important research that's coming out, and it has led to women who are mothers, and I guess I am talking specifically about that gender cohort for now, to make that part of themselves and their experience invisible as an academic. And since COVID, research which is being done in this year, it's still preliminary, but it has shown also that the unpaid work of Australian mothers, and particularly academic mothers, has increased during the pandemic. So this is sort of the context in which this things that I'm talking about sits. So some of the advice I would have is, and drawing on my own experience, was first of all to surround yourself by people who have similar experiences to you. A mentor who understands the impacts of family on your time is crucial. That was something that was really important for me as when I came back from maternity leave. And also from the perspective of what the school and the department can do in this area, encouraging a range of people to offer mentoring as well is really important, so that encouragement comes from the top end as well as just leaving, so that we're not just leaving young or early career people to try and seek out that support. I think that support's really important. And then just generally sort of surrounding yourself with a support network that includes people who are in the same position as you, so that you don't feel isolated or that you're not the only person going through this. And that can be I think making that quite a formal network is really helpful, because it can provide emotional support, but it can also provide really useful support in other more career-oriented ways. Let me know if I'm speaking for too long, going for too long, Tasha.
I forgot to put my timer on. I think you're okay. One more minute.
Okay, great. Co-publishing is another really important thing. And so when you are in a position where you're perhaps an RA, and this is difficult, and I acknowledge the power imbalances within that relationship, but looking to negotiate to, first of all, particularly if you're an RA in an area that is your own personal experience, field of research, negotiating time to conduct your own research and to co-publish with your employer is a really great way of getting publications when you're working in a paid position. And similarly, for those people who are employing an RA, I think we will really need to make sure that we do offer that opportunity to co-publish and to offer opportunity for these younger or early career academics or with caring responsibilities in particular to turn the research that they're doing into something that they get benefit in a career sense out of. I'll sort of skip a little bit of this because the other thing I think is, and I can perhaps talk about it later on, is just about making sure that we talk explicitly, and I think COVID has actually provided the opportunity to do this, about how parenthood and caring responsibilities have impacted research.
Yeah.
So we need to not continue to allow that to be invisible. Yeah. And so for me personally, I'll stop here if necessary, in a lot of my applications since before becoming a mother as well as after, I ended up, and this was following advice from mentors, I talked about the impact that both caring responsibilities and health, and in my own personal case, that was infertility treatments and miscarriage, impacted on my publications and on my career. And I talked about that in my rope section of my DECRA and my DP applications, and a number of other mothers on other work that I know about have done similar things. And so what that's doing is making it a part of the conversation around academic parenthood, so particularly I think motherhood. We can change by doing this the common perception of what a normal academic career looks like and what interruptions to that normal academic career looks like. So yeah, that's I can stop there and we can perhaps come back to some of that, and I've got plenty of other things I can say as well.
Thank you, Shannon. You've just raised such important points there. I liked right at the start where you talked about self-care, which is something that Quinn spoke about in the video too, that we don't often talk about when we talk about care and responsibilities. I love your making explicit the discrimination that mothers face, and also making transparent a non-linear career. You've got some really great concrete suggestions there. I've myself have only started co-publishing, and it's been life-changing. I should have been doing this the whole way along. It's it's really important.
From my experience, 2 or 3 key co-publishing pieces with senior academics who were my employers in the year before I went on mat leave, while I was undergoing fertility treatments and had significant issues with work time. And then in the year after I came back from mat leave, if I hadn't had them, my publication record would look much patchier. And so that was just crucial, I think. Yeah. And it was just a really good experience to see how people write.
Yeah.
As well.
And I like what you say about putting the onus back on the institution and on senior academics to share that academic capital. They've built up their capital, now they need to share that, and that's being a good academic citizen. That's being a caring academic citizen.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that there's also ways that senior teaching academics can do the same thing for junior and casual teaching. Whether that's getting them to give guest lectures and paying them for that, and then that's something that can also go on a CV, or whether it's making sure that you minimise the amount of unpaid work, because there is so much unpaid work that goes on as a casual academic. So just being really, really conscious of those things means that you're caring for the staff who are in these vulnerable and insecure work, who are doing so much of the work as well that a university needs.
Yes, thank you so much, Shannon, for sharing those insights. I'm going to move on now to Karen. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks, Tasha. Thanks for inviting me to speak today.
You're welcome. So I'm hoping that you can talk to me about the disciplinary differences within academia. So we know that there are some types of research and some disciplines, for instance, any discipline requiring lab work or bench work, where it's actually very hard to walk away from that type of research. It's less family friendly than the type of research that perhaps can be done at home. And I'm wondering what your observations are about, as a woman in STEM, about our research culture here at La Trobe, and how it can be improved to make space for caring work.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Tash. And yeah, look, I mean, starting off and thinking about bench scientists, so probably I guess one of the things that we've chatted about a little bit is I probably wouldn't classify myself as that. And I actually probably think I'm quite lucky that I don't classify myself as a bench scientist, because I think, you know, from what I observe about people who do that work, it really doesn't seem to have that flexibility that would let you, you know, have the time away that you need for maternity leave, for raising your children, for being part-time, because there's experiments that need to be done in a very timely matter, and you can't have it running and not go back in and check what the results are. So yeah, I actually sort of almost can't imagine what it would be like to try and do that and then juggle and do parenting the way I've done. I'm thinking it reflects actually a little bit of it, and I think there are maybe some disciplinary differences, but also some similarities, because as Jill was saying in the video, you know, she's talking about the field work that she does, and that's the same kind of thing. Like, you've got to, you know, be somewhere away for a long period of time, and that sort of work is just really hard to reconcile with caring responsibilities. So I think, yeah, there's lots of things you got to think about where someone's particular sort of research takes them and what the roles are there. As I said, I've been very lucky, you know, much more of my sort of data collection in STEM involves working with people, and so that tends to be a bit more flexible and tends to be in sort of normal hours, and you can arrange it when it suits you. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but you know, in that way, I feel like I've been quite lucky that there's been benefits in that area with COVID, in terms of how technology like Zoom has really advanced things, and means that I can see going forward, it's actually going to make it a lot more flexible to be able to do some of the data collection, participant interviews and things like that via Zoom, and not have that travel time and things. And yeah. So Tash, yeah, so I was just thinking back, I mean, to that question, and some of this, Shannon, I guess you touched on a bit, was thinking about, you know, how caring sort of interrupts your type of research. And I don't think this is particular to science at all. I think probably everyone could do this, but that idea of getting uninterrupted thinking time, and you know, the ability to stop and sort of plan what you want to do next, and that kind of thing is really difficult when you're caregiving. You know, you've often got very limited time to do what you need to do with your work. I've just been reflecting on, we actually very excitedly have finally got this review that's come, this meta-analysis review that I've been working on. And I'd like to say I actually tried to submit this before I went on maternity leave. And you know, this is an example of where I think caring responsibilities have really impacted. My daughter's 7. So this is, you know, like a 10-year project it has now been. And I was reflecting on this process the other day, and a lot of what has held that particular paper up has been because of caring responsibilities, you know, because it was sort of almost at a point, and then went on maternity leave, and then with the interruptions, things sort of didn't have the ability to actually get that over the line. And then when you're back at work, there's the day-to-day things that really need doing. And so some of these big projects, you just don't sort of have, you know, the time where it might tick over in the background, but your day gets filled with other more sort of urgent deadlines and things like that. So I think some of those sort of unseen things are what can make it quite difficult, that you can't complete things as easily in the same time and complete multiple sort of tasks, which is sometimes what you need to be doing in a research career. You need to sort of have a few different things ticking along at once. So yeah, so then I think getting to, you know, what might the university, what might the culture be able to do about some of these issues? And again, I mean, Shannon, I think you touched on lots of these things, but, you know, the first thing I was going to say is about mentorship. So having good mentors, having people who have done something very similar before and seeing how they do it, going beyond mentorship and having some sponsorships. So people who can pull you up for things that are going to be beneficial for your career, can say, here's someone that would be great for this job, that you might not be in their headspace to be aware of all these opportunities and stuff. So people who are really helping you drive your career, I think that could be really useful. And probably something, I know the university's got some good mentorship programs, but there's probably, I haven't experienced as much of the sponsorship, so that might be quite good to have some, think about how we could do some more of that. You know, again, in that sort of vein, so it's about role models. So maybe, you know, you have your specific mentorship and sponsorship role models, but specific people who are doing the mentorship and sponsorship with you, but having some role models that you can see across the university about how different people do this, how senior people have managed their career interruptions, how people have written these into their grant applications, and having examples and making that a bit more normalised, and so you can get some ideas if that's how they did it, that's how I might do it. You know, recognition of that with your career success reviewers so that you can sort of plan things appropriately given what's been in the past and what might be coming up, those kinds of things. Yeah, so I think they were my main ideas around that.
Thank you, Karen. Some really good ideas there. I really like the way you talk about time as a resource. You know, like we're all, if time is a resource, we're kind of resource poor. Time is, you know, it's finite, and it's what people with caring responsibilities lack the most. I also really like calling out sponsorship as something active. I mean, mentorship can be, the mentor takes almost a bit of a passive view where we actually want sponsors to step up, as you say, and actively sponsor people, actively point them in the right direction, put them on grants, put them on publications. And you'll be pleased to know that the university will be doing something in this space next year. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, Karen. Michelle, I'm so pleased to have you here today because, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about caring work, we often talk about, we often mean caring for children, but of course there are other types of caring work, including caring for community. So I'm really hoping that you can talk to me about what caring for community means for First Nations and Indigenous people, and how the university can really support staff with that.
Thank you so much, Tash, and thank you for inviting me to come today. It's lovely to be here on this rainy spring day. I'm on Dja Dja Wurrung country, so I want to acknowledge Dja Dja Wurrung as a Yorta Yorta woman near the beautiful Yukawa River, in English, Campaspe. Yeah, great question. And first of all, I'd like to define a little bit this caring word. Because myself as an Aboriginal woman, and of course I don't speak for all Aboriginal people, and everyone would have a diversity of replies, but for myself as an Aboriginal woman, the word caring is reciprocal relationship. So if I'm in a caring relationship, it's not because this person or entity is less than me and it's a need. I'm participating in a reciprocal relationship. So who I care for equally cares for me. So it's a give and take. And yes, you're absolutely right. These reciprocal relationships are much more than just my children or my family or my extended family. They are my community. They are people I may not even be related to. So it's like a definition of family. So when I'm talking to other Aboriginal people and we talk about who we care for or in these reciprocal relationships, it's who is their family. So we'll use the word family a lot more. But also a really important thing to sort of say is that it's more than humans. As an Aboriginal woman, I equally have reciprocal relationships, caring responsibilities to country. So for Aboriginal people, we may, when we talk about caring, we may even be talking about, you know, non-humans, particular animals, for me, you know, I'm very close to crows. I'm a river woman. I've grown up in the Murray River region. So I have, you know, more than a connection, more than an affinity, especially as I get older. You know, as I get older as an Aboriginal woman, my responsibility and my caring roles to country is going to, you know, increase because we, you know, increase in responsibilities as we get older. But it's also, you know, caring, and this might sound like, well, what is she talking about? But it's also caring to the spiritual world, to my ancestors. As the second eldest child of a big family, there are stories that need to be told. There are things about my ancestors that need to be continued. So I also have a caring role to my ancestors, and that could also include, you know, putting meaning to particular animals that might come into my every day. It might be paying particular attention to my dreams. So caring can be, yes, to family, yes, to community, but also to country and also to the spiritual world. And so part of what I would talk about is yes, we talk about leave and for what reasons we can have leave, but also allowing things to be said. You know, do I feel silly at La Trobe talking about having a caring role to country? You know, is this thing, you know how people talk about there are some things that are allowable to be said and some things are like, no, don't say that, you'll sound silly. So for La Trobe to have a culture of what is okay to be said, whether you're Aboriginal or not, you know, when you discuss your caring roles. So I think that's probably one of the points I'd like to say about, you know, for whether you're Aboriginal or not, you know, it's okay for you to define what caring means to you. And it's okay for you to define, you know, who you're caring for, whether it's human or not human. So allow different types of conversations to occur. And then probably the other thing I really want to talk about is, as an Aboriginal woman, I have both an individual and a collective identity. So caring also happens on those two layers. So and so for La Trobe to understand these reciprocal relationships, La Trobe and all the campuses that they're located on and all the countries that they're located on, in a collective way, has a caring role to the communities of where they're situated. So I think that would probably be one of the things that I'd like to, you know, say, you know, one of the questions that you asked was, you know, what can La Trobe do? And I think for them to position themselves in these reciprocal relationships for the actual landscape for where they're located. An auntie that I have a lot to do with, she always reminds me, she said, Michelle, as a La Trobe staff person, you know, you talk about student recruitment, you conduct your PhD research. So you as a La Trobe person are going out into community and doing this engagement. But remember, as an Aboriginal woman, part of your caring role is a reciprocal relationship. So equally, you know, what is La Trobe doing for the communities where we're situated? And I know sometimes these conversations can be put into the feel-good category, but they're actually much more than just niceness or culture. They're much more than that, because I remember one day I was having a very hard month when I was at Bendigo campus. We all have hard months. And I thought, wow, I'm just going to, you know, block out 2 hours and go to Bendigo District Aboriginal Cooperative and join in the women's group. You just be invisible, be another Aboriginal woman sitting at the table doing some sort of activity. And so I went along and it was just fantastic, you know, hearing everyone talking. I was just invisible. I was caring for myself. You know, I needed to just ground a little bit and, you know, calm down. But an uncle that I previously worked with came along. He saw me sitting at the table, wanted to catch up. Where are you working now, Shell? And I explained that I'm at La Trobe. I lecture into social work. And he was like, yeah. And it was very brief. But the interesting thing was, and it always sticks with me, and I saw this pattern happen over and over again, is that in that moment, he must have saw La Trobe as participating in a reciprocal caring role with the community. Because I was there, sitting at the table, just another woman. And the very next week, his wife and 3 of his children rocked up to the Indigenous Student Services Office wanting to enrol. And so, so it's the understanding of caring being a reciprocal relationship, both at the individual and the collective level, would probably be something, you know, I'd like to highlight. And, you know, also my first point at the beginning, that it's human and non-human. And, you know, let's allow more different types of conversations to occur so we can, you know, be human beings in this place we call work.
Wow, Michelle, my goodness, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's, wow, you've said so many amazing things. This concept of reciprocity is just so profound, and again, putting the onus back on the institution, on La Trobe, to recognise its obligations to communities, and that care. Yeah, you're expanding that concept of caring work. I'm furiously taking notes here. That's so great. And I love what you said about allowing things to be said. I think that that's kind of a a thread throughout this whole event so far, that really creating a culture where it's, yeah, things can be said and that we can make visible different ways of being, different ways of knowing, and different types of careers. So thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Tash.
So we'll move to, so Julian, welcome. And we all loved your story in the video about combining your parenting with your fieldwork. One of the findings in the literature about academia and caring work is that often caring work is seen as more compatible with teaching. And we know that women and gender diverse staff are overrepresented in teaching roles. And this is because teaching can be done part-time, it can be interrupted in a way that perhaps research can't be. But then we also know that teaching loads can be immense and can eat into your research time. So I'm really hoping that you can talk to me about how you've balanced both roles over your career, and how the university can better support teaching and research staff who have caring responsibilities and not make it an either or thing.
Well, thank you, Tasha, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the panel today. And I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from Wurundjeri country, the northern outskirts of Melbourne, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Yeah, I think this is a really important conversation, especially during COVID times where we're seeing staff leave the university. Seems to be a lot of stress around teaching increasing, and also even the announcement and the encouragement of people to take on teaching only positions. So I think this is going to become probably even more important in the conversation of how we help people in a caring role. I guess I have always tried to keep up teaching as well as research, and that's primarily because I really enjoy teaching. I enjoy interaction with students. I don't enjoy the marking, I'll be honest, most people don't, but I do enjoy teaching. I guess I've been lucky in that I have been able to select what I teach. So I teach what I know, and I don't have to take on too much teaching. So I've got to negotiate what I teach. So I teach Australian archaeology, zoo archaeology to my strengths. I have tried to keep up both too, because ultimately I would like a teaching and research position. And so I know to be eligible and to be competitive that you have to show that you're not just a good researcher, that you can also teach. How do you balance both? I think it's a really different one. And how do you not let things eat into both? So I guess what I try to do is maintain that teaching, but I've been lucky that I've been able to teach intensively, so intensive subjects lately. I taught a bit earlier this semester, so only for 5 weeks, not for the entire semester. So I've gotten to kind of pigeonhole it, I guess, at the moment. Working from home is a bit different because you are a bit more flexible, but then of course teaching eats up a lot of time. So you have to work out how you can balance that the best that you can. And so I try to teach what I know and bring my research into my teaching, because I've been able to combine doing a bit of background research in both, so that I can use that background research for teaching and also for my own research. So I've been trying to get it around that way as well, which isn't always easy. So I guess it's a hard one, because I know that a lot of, especially women and carers, are pushed into really high teaching loads early on. We're the ones who do most of the teaching. As a sessional lecturer at La Trobe, I know how much work it takes. And it's very, very hard to work out what you should be doing. Should you be spending more time in teaching? And of course, you want to have good teaching outcomes. Most of us are really diligent and hardworking lecturers, and we want our students to come out, especially after COVID, not being too stressed, being able to get through what they need to learn. So how do we balance this and also keep our research up as well? So I often have people ask me, why do I bother teaching when I don't have to? I could just be research all the time. And I always say, but I enjoy what I do. I also teach Aboriginal Certificate 4 students out in the field through La Trobe, and I think that's really important aspect to my research, is to give back to community, to both to Aboriginal students and non-Aboriginal students. And I think if I am lucky enough to get funding from the university or from the ARC, then I should also be giving back in that way as well. It's also a way to engage with students and find honours and PhD students, because we are, as researchers, we are obligated to help mentor the next generation as well. So I think that's a really important aspect as well. And I think teaching helps you to become a better balanced researcher as well. So I think the skills that you pick up through teaching can be used in your impact and engagement with the general public, with community, with seminars and all those sorts of things too. But finding a balance is really hard. And I guess I know the university is getting under more and more pressure with less staff and teaching. How do we find that balance? I was trying to think of ways that the university could help, and I'm not entirely sure how to phrase that at the moment, given what's going on with voluntary redundancies and so on too, because we don't know what it's going to look like. But I guess making sure that university does keep to workloads and does try to keep that balance between its staff, especially its ECRs and MCRs, and especially those in caring roles, not overwhelming them with too much teaching, not taking on teaching new subjects, which takes a lot more time than teaching something that you've already taught. Ensuring that lecturers are given the opportunity to suggest what they want to teach so they can teach to their strengths, so that they can work on what they already know rather than having to learn things from the start. So I'm trying to think of ways that so those kind of aspects, I guess, I think are ways that the university could help. And line managers too, making sure that line managers are aware of the enormous impact that caring can have. And I think also the university may be trying to ensure that people have line managers that perhaps have had caring roles in the past and understand what their staff are going through, especially early on, and returning from maternity leave and those sorts of things, or being part-time. So I guess that's kind of my take on it at the moment, and the sorts of things that I think the university could take into consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. You've actually got some really concrete points in there, and I'm kind of reminded of Shannon's point right at the start, where managers need to recognise who's in their workforce, who's in their department, what stage are they at their career, are they in precarious employment, what's their caring load, and not, as you say, overload them with teaching, or share around the resources, share around the academic capital, and just be more explicit about who's doing what work. I actually think that's really good advice, and thank you too for talking about what's happening at the university at the moment, because obviously it's a very difficult time for lots of people, so thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so we've heard from our panel, and thank you all so much for that. I'm going to start sharing my screen again. If you can just confirm that you can see that. Yes? No.
Yes, we can see that. Thanks, Tasha.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So while you're thinking of some questions for our terrific panel, there's one other thing that I want to talk to you about today, which is that the university is looking to start a support group for staff with caring responsibilities. So this was kind of already on the cards pre-COVID-19, but as we know, the restrictions have been incredibly difficult on staff with caring responsibilities, and the university is looking to do something. And so what we're proposing is that we launch a support group very similar to WAPS, the Women's Academic Promotion Support Program. It will be open to women and gender diverse staff, anyone with caring responsibilities. And it will be very similar to the structure of WAPS, in that it will have two components: monthly workshops on topics of career progression, and then peer support sessions. So participants will be divided into smaller working groups according to the outcome they're seeking. If they want to get peer support on a grant application, or on a CV or a job application, that's what this kind of support group will do. It's in its complete feedback or suggestions for how you think this should be improved, what the content should be, if you'd like to be involved. So have a look at that, and you can ask a question of the panel, or you can give some feedback about that support group, and it's over to you, participants. Okay, so I can see that we've got one question that's come through already, and I'll just put it out to the whole panel, and anyone can answer it. So it is: how do we facilitate systemic change that recognises how long things actually take and provides a livable income? It feels actually impossible as someone with an invisible condition that sometimes is not a problem and then sometimes is, therefore coming more from the self-care perspective. So the question's about how do we facilitate systemic change that recognises how difficult it is for people living with the condition that makes it difficult for them to work, I'm assuming, on a full-time basis. Again, it's a question about how do we recognise, you know, non-linear, uninterrupted careers. Anyone got any?
Look, I'll jump in. I don't have an answer because I think that's a really large question that the university sort of needs to address as a whole. You know, and there's two parts to that. I mean, there's the systemic change needed to recognise how long things actually take and provide a livable income, which you know, I think researchers on short-term contracts grapple with this even without having conditions such as the one that this question addresses, or caring responsibilities for family members or community. But for me, one of the first things that needs to be done is to start talking about it and to bring the conversation out into the open in ways that are not, that actually are sort of saying, this is what it is like to be an academic, and these are the responsibilities, whether it's self-care responsibilities or care for somebody else, that I juggle. And I think Michelle's point earlier that the university as a workplace can do so much more to recognise that we are humans in all of the complexity and with all of the different elements of being human, that we're not just workers. So that's, I guess that's a comment rather than being able to offer anything really, really practical. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, and I think we just need to keep asking these questions of the university as well, while also acknowledging that the university is going through a crisis at the moment, and unfortunately probably these are not going to be questions that there's a lot of time and space that the university will address.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah.
What Shannon said was really good. Probably the main point I really liked was just having open conversations, because there seems to be, what would you say, a culture of conversation that is, what's the word? I don't know, it goes underground in a little way. And, you know, we laugh about it, but, you know, the whole concept that, you know, the trope sucks your blood, you know, that's a joke. You know, you laugh, you know, if you're working 0.7, you're really going to work full time. Some of this stuff, people say in humour, but it's covering over some deeper self-care business. Like the original question, you know, how long does things actually take? You know, the tasks that we do within our workload. So I think starting with open conversation, like you say, Shannon, is good.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's been, as I said earlier, an overwhelming theme of this event is starting the conversation and making space for that, a safe space, you know, for those conversations. And that can be, as Shannon said right at the start, you know, creating your network of people. And that's what I'm kind of hoping with this support group for staff with caring responsibilities, that it will give people the words, the narrative that they need to speak up and to speak out. And when you're in those really tricky conversations with managers or heads of school or heads of department, that you have those words and you feel like you can say them, because it's not always easy. We've got another question, and again, I'll just put it out to the whole panel. As a young woman, how does one prepare for maternity leave in their future career plan, say in 5 to 10 years' time? Some friends have hid their plans to their employers and others have been open. Some have waited for a new job and others feel more comfortable taking this time when they're really settled in a role. So I think the question is, how do you plan for maternity leave? I hope I'm asking that question correctly.
Can I jump in there, Tasha?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yep.
Jenny Graves also asked or included something earlier on, which kind of is along the same lines about maternity leave being a two-edged sword and so on. And I think the answer is it's really hard to plan for maternity leave. I mean, number one, your employer shouldn't even be asking if you are. But I think, I don't know, it's really hard because you don't know where you're going to be in 5 to 10 years' time. And you also a lot of my friends, I didn't, found fertility really difficult as well. So I would say, number one, you want to plan for yourself. Don't plan for your employer. It's your life. But I do understand that and it's easy for me to say, having 2 children and still being in research, it's easy for me to say that. So I think you've got to do what feels right for you. Try, and as some of the things we've suggested, mentor, try and set up a good mentor, try and find somebody that you can trust who maybe has been through this as well to talk to. I will say the number one question I get asked by young researchers is, how did I manage to do it all? And I'm writing a piece at the minute about being a paleontologist, because that's what I was as my PhD was in. How did I manage to do that and survive and still be a female in academia? Because there's very few who've gone that trajectory. So it's a really, really common answer from young HERs, young women. And I think it's something that we do need to talk more about. And I think that's why this support network is really, really important, because there are so many people thinking the same thing. And I have lots of friends who tell me now that they wish they'd had kids and didn't because of their careers. So I think it's something that we really do need to talk about and try to help people as much as we can, because it is really, really hard to plan. I don't think you can plan, is what I'm trying to say. I think you have to plan for what you think is right for you, and and try and go with it the best you can, because it is really difficult. But hopefully the university will bring in support things that will help people get assistance to be able to come back in on campus and go to things like Jenny Graves was suggesting, to be able to attend lab meetings if you need to, research groups and so on. I brought my baby both times to campus when I was on maternity leave to attend things. Sometimes I got strange looks from the people in those meetings doing that, but I still did it to keep my foot in the door.
And I would just want to jump in on that. I mean, I think as I've alluded to before, I think with Zoom, what COVID's done with those teleconferencing things, that you may not even need to go into campus. You might be able to join your lab meetings and things while you're feeding baby if you need to, and stuff like that. So hopefully some of those things may work to make it a little bit more connected and have people feeling less out of it. I know I've certainly been able to attend sort of more international conferences and professional development events and things in the evening this year, because I haven't had to travel and work out childcare and all that kind of thing. So maybe there's some positives out of this situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that we can start looking now at how technology can help people with caring responsibilities to attend more things that you previously just were totally unavailable, a seminar in the evening, for instance. But I mean, I just want to add to that and say I agree entirely with what Gillian and Karen have said. You can't plan, you should plan your life, first of all, rather than plan your career and then your life fits around it. I mean, I'm a perfect example of how that doesn't work, because I took me 5 years to finally have my baby. But also, I think, I don't know, this is sort of a bit of a heartfelt thing, I suppose, but don't feel that you have to just compromise your having children and you're caring for your children and you're taking that time of your maternity leave to forget about work, just leave work behind if you want to. If for you, the right thing and what makes you feel fulfilled and happy is attending things while you're on mat leave, or writing while you're on mat leave, then do that. But don't feel that you have to do that as well. And if people don't do that, and enough people don't do that because they don't want to, then perhaps the expectations on women will start to change a little bit as well.
Yeah, some really great points there. Thank you, Shannon. So we've reached 3 o'clock, and I'm really aware of not keeping anyone too late, particularly as, like me, you probably have to go and pick up kids from school or childcare or attend to other life. So thank you so much to the wonderful panel. You've all been fantastic and just shared. Thank you for sharing such personal stories and some really practical suggestions. If you do want to keep the conversation going, you can send any questions to the Athena Swan at La Trobe inbox, and I can try and follow them up that way. And yes, thank you all for joining. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Tash, for organising it as well. It's been really great
Thank
to be part of.